Joe Girard to Pitt, Puff Johnson. Let's talk about some transfer portal opportunities the Panthers have in the Pitt basketball landscape. So I'll come up today on this episode of Locked On Pitt.
You are Locked On Pitt, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Panthers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pitt podcast, your daily podcast covering the Pittsburgh Panthers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I am your host, Nick Faribaugh. And on this fine day, got a lot to talk about, but not limited to a few very intriguing portal options for the Pitt men's basketball team and where they go from here. This is a fascinating landscape, if you will, for Pitt men's basketball with 3 scholarships. No one to transfer out yet other than John Hughley, of course. So will they keep the whole roster intact? I think that's obviously still remaining to be seen, but it's going to be something to watch. So some of the very interesting things that have come out early on in the portal, we've seen Pitt's list grow a little bit. We've seen Pitt start to diversify their list. But what was more important and more intriguing to me was when you looked at specifically guys that were of the mold that Nelly Cummings, Greg Elliott, and those guys were of. Pitt's reached out to a few of them, not all of them. But someone that they have seemingly gotten in on and gotten significant traction with, by the way, is none other than Joe Girard. And this is incredibly interesting to me because you can look back through the Syracuse games and you could see there were people that were getting enough slander outside of Jim Boeheim. I would imagine the two that were getting the most slander from Pitt fans were Joe Girard and Judah Mintz. That's really kind of how this was. And so this is a fascinating thing. So let me talk about Joe Girard. Interesting player. You probably know a little bit about Joe Girard having watched Pitt just because you have seen Joe Girard play so many games against Pitt. Now, he has a lot of teams after him. He has a lot of teams that he's going to visit. You look at Indiana, Tennessee, Auburn, Butler, LSU, Florida, Ohio State, Stanford, Clemson, BYU, and more. He only has 1 season left of eligibility. But Joe Girard's stats are really solid. Now, he's only 6'1", 190. But if you're looking for a guy that can score and really, I think, hunt his shot at a high level, this is that guy. That's what makes Joe Girard a special type of player. It's his ability to hunt his shot, and he's a really good shot because you look at his last 2 years, 40% from 3, 38% from 3 at 221 attempts and 231 attempts. That's really good. Joe Girard hunts his shot. Now, his efficiency isn't very high. It's 40%. So he shoots a lot of threes, and he makes a lot of threes, but he's not a super high efficient scorer like a Jamarius Burton, for example, is, right? But he's 86% from the free throw line. Last year, he's 88%. The year before that, really good shooter. Now, the rebounding stats aren't good, and that's not that surprising, of course. Playing in the Syracuse zone, you're not going to have usually good rebounding stats no matter where you play, unless you're Jesse Edwards, of course. But that's something. And then the defense, I think it's just a question. I think it's less of can he do it? He's not a great defender. I think that jumps out right away. But is he a better defender than maybe He showcases it because he played in the zone. I think that's the question. So that's kind of the rundown on Joe Girard. Really good hunting his shot. Really, when he gets hot, he is fantastic. And when he doesn't, sometimes he doesn't offer a lot. But he's a starter. He's Greg Elliott in a lot of ways. He's very Greg Elliott-y to me. And so you look at that. I think that's where he slots in here. I think he slots in at that two spot that you're looking for, right? The catch and shoot guy that can go create. And he can create more than Elliott did. I think that would give them a little bit of an interesting dynamic because Joe Girard can create off the bounce, can step back, can kind of do little different stuff that you didn't see Greg Elliott do all that much during his tenure here at Pitt. So I find that interesting. Joe Girard would be a starter. He would be an energizer buddy. It just comes in like that. I mean, the dude is legitimately energetic and enthralling when it hits. He's already met with Butler, Stanford, LSU, Pitt, and Washington. And with his at-home visits. Jeff Capel went up on Wednesday to conduct that in-home interview with Joe Girard. And he's receiving a ton of interest from other teams too. That 1 year of eligibility and what he brings to the table is certainly something that to me is very appealing to many teams. And so Girard, he got a lot of flack from the people in Q's. But this is a pretty solid player. But if he's not in your squad, I'll tell you what, he'll get under your skin a little bit. But he is a really, really good veteran presence that this Pitt team could use, and that shooting presence that this team could use. Because, man, the team can shoot the lights out of the basketball last year. If they can get anything similar to that, they have an opportunity to do something really special. And Girard would really help beefing up that kind of ecosystem to getting back there, right? Blake Henson loves threes. Well, no one else on the roster is going to love to shoot threes like that. Just quite yet. I mean, Dior Johnson will take them, so will Jalad Lowe, so will Carlton Carrington. They'll all take them. But no one's going to hunt a shot like Joe Girard. At least that's on the roster right now. And so that's a unique quality that Pitt's going to need next year. And the fact that he's so good at hunting that shot, it would be weird. Let's be real there. It would be weird seeing Joe Girard donning blue and gold. But it's worthy of trying to go get him for sure. All right, I want to go through some other portal options, but let's talk about the hometown kid. What about Puff Johnson? He's got interest from Pitt. He's got interest from many programs. Let's talk about it. But first, folks, I want to let you know about FanDuel. FanDuel, the official sports book of Locked On. Folks, in the tournament, it's heating up, It's coming up this weekend, and there's no better place to get on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. That's because right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000. That's a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. So just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and sign up today to claim your no-sweat first bet. Then you can wager on everything from the money line to point spreads to which team will be cutting down the net. Folks, it's all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So don't miss your shot at a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel. All right, folks. Let's get back into this. I want to talk Puff Johnson. I talked a little bit about this when Austin Bechtold came on the show about the possibility of a Puff Johnson coming to Pitt. Well, it's now confirmed that Pitt has reached out to Puff Johnson. Now, there's nothing outside of that, just reported interest that they have touched out and put the feelers out on Puff Johnson. So I don't know if anything else is going to matriculate from that. I don't know if he even wants to come back home. But it's clear that there's a lot of interest for him. Here's the reported list: Kentucky, Indiana, Arizona State, TCU, West Virginia, then Pitt, Oklahoma, LSU, Butler, Seton Hall, Tulane, Colorado State, and so many more, including Duquesne, by the way, if you are also rooting for the Dukes out there. But look at what Puff Johnson could potentially bring to the table. Puff Johnson, when you look at what he did for UNC last year, 6'8", 200 guy. He's not a guy that scored a lot of points. He just did 3.1 points per game. It's not really what they need. He averaged 4.1. Sorry, my bad. 3.1 per career is what Puff Johnson has. 2.7 rebounds, 66% from the line, only 28% from deep, though, 39% from the field. So it's interesting to me. Look at Puff Johnson. I'll say this. This is a common sense. I want to put it out here. I have heard nothing from within the program about Puff Johnson and Pitt. I have not asked about it. But my initial reaction to this is a fail-safe plan should they lose one of Nate Santos, Will Jeffers. We talked about roster retention, right? You kind of knew Hughley was gone. Well, so far no one else has entered the portal. This to me feels like that kind of type. Puff Johnson can rebound well. His rebound percentages on the defensive end particularly are quite good. I like that. I also like the fact that I think he's still young, and I think he's got plenty of upside. I think he's still got room to grow in his frame too, right? I like a lot of things about Puff. He's got potential, but with 3 scholarships, I can't see them taking a chance on Puff Johnson. And there's a lot of reasons why. But it's because they need offense. There's no one that is proven outside of Blake Hinson right now on this team that I can just go get a bucket. Now, I believe that Carlton Carrington, Dior Johnson, Jelon Lowe have these capabilities, right? Highly touted freshmen, but they're freshmen. And it's hard to trust all freshmen. And Puff is a good wing, but they need a wing that can shoot. They need a wing that can hunt shots. They need a wing that can pair with the 2 and give me some offense, that hyper offense, right? I need a Nike Sabandy, man. I need a Nike Sabandy and a Greg Elliott. And I wouldn't mind a Nelly Cummings. Like, that's what you need. You need a lot still on this team in terms of offense to me. A 23 team doesn't have proven offensive guys in the backcourt. It's a lot of questions, and I would like to add proven offense. So even if I think those freshmen are going to fit in quite nicely and add to that dynamic, I don't personally know that. So it's quite tough for me to fully buy into everything. And to fully engulf myself into Puff Johnson when I know you need bucket getters. It's not really against anyone else. Not against Puff. Plenty good. But I just don't know the fit right now with what they need is there. And I think that is a very key distinction. Does the need match up with what Puff brings skill set wise? I'm not sure it does. But I think if Nate Santos transfers or Will Jeffers transfers, I'm not sure if anything's going to happen there. I think that's where we could see this heat up a little bit more. I think that's where we could see this take more of a turn and really kind of pick up. But for right now, My personal reading tea leaves, common sense opinion is that that's not there yet because I don't know if that's the skill set they're looking for at a wing. I think they're going to be looking for an offensive wing that's able to really shoot the basketball and a guy that can maybe play with some length or rebound on the defensive end. I think that is particularly true when you look at the guys they have kind of offered thus far and seemingly are honing in on. I think that is really something that you can't overlook. So when you overlook, um, when you kind of overlook this entire thing of what they're doing in the portal, there's a few commonalities I want to break down. Shooting, they're also looking at bangers at the five position. They're looking at Hughley-ish type players. Um, Brian Celebang out of Tulsa is an interesting player there. He's a Montreal native. He's got averaged 12 points and about 9 rebounds for Tulsa this season. Interesting player. Certainly there. Can't shoot. Not really good from the line, but I think that I'm a big proponent of adding different types of dudes. Like I don't need a third Federico, right? Like I don't need another Diaz Graham twin. You have two of them already, and you have a Federico, and you have a Will Jeffress, right? Like this is what when I'm talking about why Puff wouldn't come. Well, I have Puff Johnson on the roster in many ways, and Will Jeffress and Nate Santos. So I'm just going to invest in Nate and Will. I don't need Puff because he doesn't really bring much different than that, right? I want different types of guys. So I want an offensive wing. I want a two that can really score and create off the bounce. Like I want that type of stuff. That's why Girard is so interesting. He's a different type of guy. And so when you look at it, to me, what they need to add, I think they need to add a two, a wing, and a five. And people will say point guard. I think Dior and Jalan Lowe are your point guards. That doesn't mean they don't need another ball handler, though. And I like that about Girard, too. He can handle the ball. So we didn't talk about that with Joe Girard. He can handle the ball. I like that. So a third ball handler, maybe that's a two combo guard, like a Jamarius Burton type that you trust to handle the ball, is a really good type to add to the roster. But when we're talking about the front court and why would they add, I see people, well, they have Guillermo and Fede, and then they have Jorge too, and Blake's got the four. And I'm like, yes, yes, yes. All true, all true, all true. But what about the banger down low that just goes and gets boards? What about a guy that just comes in and plays physical with you? What about a guy that just wants to knock your teeth in? You know? What about that guy? The John Hughley type. So why not add him? Why not add a guy like that? You only have two true fives. And if Fede gets hurt like he did last year near the end, it could be a disaster for you. It could be a huge disaster for you. Absolute huge disaster. Why would you want to do that? So add another five. And a different type that you don't have. Maybe you have less rim protection. Maybe he can't hedge. But maybe he's a rebounder that bangs down low and can play with his back to the post. And maybe that'll work against certain teams. It's good to have matchup flexibility. I think that is one thing Pitt lost last year when they lost Will Jeffress, Dior Johnson, John Hughley for varying different reasons. They lost the ability to mix and match what they wanted to do a little bit. And they still had enough to get by. But when they ran into Duke, for example, when they ran into Florida State, it gave them an extremely, extremely hard time against those teams because they didn't have any way to truly overcome what you looked at on that length side. So different types of dudes coming together on the team. Yes, they have to mesh together, but it's good to have different types of guys for different types of teams. The best teams have different types of guys because they can match up well against any type of team. Now, sometimes, they have their superstars that are multidimensional and can do whatever they want to do. But I think that's something that we can't overlook when Pitt's going into the portal here. Looking at guys that can fully entrench themselves into something different and to bring something spice like to the table, right? A different spice, a different flavor to your front court. I think that's not a bad idea for Pitt at all. All right, folks. As always, thank you for listening to the Locked On Pitt podcast. I'm your host, Nick Faribaugh. As we ended here, as always, hail to Pitt.